Hello, my name is Danny Shaw, and welcome to my final presentation on privacy. Before my presentation launches, I'd like to thank all of you for a wonderful term. I enjoyed our interactions and discussions on discussions, and I hope to have future classes with all of you. So what exactly is privacy? Some definitions might include the right to be left alone, the right to have no monitoring, individual control over our PII, or the right to decide. Privacy varies by culture and society. There just isn't a universal definition. Further, in America, we like to use the term rights freely. In reality, the only rights we have are those granted by the government. Individual privacy is actually fairly new in terms of human existence. Some might say the initial act of privacy was Eve covering herself with a fig leaf in the Garden of Eden. Whether one follows the Bible or not, individual privacy was mostly non-existent until cities developed during the Industrial Revolution. Prior to that, societies were community-based, and the good of the state was favored over individual concerns. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato stated a preference for exactly that in his book Laws around 400 BC. Even in the Middle Ages, society was community-based, except perhaps for the nobility or upper classes. When cities formed, people started living together in larger spaces, and as a consequence, wanted more individual privacy. Moving forward to the forming of America, the Founding Fathers believed in individual rights, and our Constitution reflects that. There were several amendments that address individual rights, specifically the First, Third, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments. In 1890, an article in Law Review essentially established the right to individual privacy. The early 20th century also had some notable events. The FTC was formed in 1914, and in 1917, protecting sealed mail was upheld by the Solicitor General of the United States. By 1948, George Orwell wrote the book 1984, an important work that coined terms like thought police and superstate. No privacy existed in George Orwell's world. Ironically, 70 years later, cameras are everywhere, at work, in stores, in schools, on streets, red light cameras, and even more than that. Privacy and the internet are even newer. The internet started in the 1960s as a simple 4-node network called ARPANET. It involved 4 universities: Stanford, UCLA, UCSD, and the University of Utah. As you can see on the slide, ARPANET was intended for scholars and as a communication channel in case of nuclear war during the Cold War period. ARPANET took flight in the 1980s. In 1986, there were only 2,000 nodes in existence. By 1988, the number of nodes was 30,000. Desktop computers further accelerated the growth of individual networks and ultimately led to internet browsers like Mosaic and Netscape. Browsers created tremendous growth of the internet. In 1993, there were only 130 websites. By 1996, there were over 100,000 websites. Savvy business titans decided the internet was ideal for commerce, and selling on the internet became so common that a dot-com bubble developed, which experienced a meltdown in the year 2000. We are frequently monitored and protected against actions of others. Or are we? What follows are a series of slides, one for each person in our class. No names or initials are used to maintain a semblance of privacy. The information was found via social media outlets, news articles, and databases. I communicated with no one to obtain any of this information. This first classmate lives on 63rd Street in a big city. Another classmate has a neighbor named Rosie. That picture I don't think is her. A third one lives on Milky Way Lane, I believe it is, in Madison. One of us lives in River Falls, and you can see that he has a nice truck for the snow. The book you see on the slide was on somebody's Amazon wish list. Another of us has parents named Holly and Harry. I don't think it's a picture of them. Someone lives in God's country in upper Wisconsin. We have a zip-lining fan, or so it appears. And one of us, unfortunately, had a bad day on 9th and Cass in La Crosse, Wisconsin. You've been found. As suggested, this information is mainly from assorted social media networks. We must be very careful about the information we share on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, etc. Our privacy is at risk. Further, debt collectors and law enforcement use the same information that I was able to obtain. It isn't difficult to draw relationships based on Facebook entries, for instance. Remember, anything you say or post can be used against you. The past is known. What about today's threats to privacy, and what's the future of privacy hold? Today, the internet has about 3.5 billion users and is still growing. With that exponential growth, there are many threats to our privacy. The government has tried to pass laws and acts since the 1970s with varying degrees of success. Technology is always ahead of the courts, Congress, and of course legal action. As you see on the screen, some significant acts were passed. The Privacy Act of 1974, Do Not Call List of 86, HIPAA in 96, and a version for children called COPPA in 1998. As we covered in class, the Graham, Leach, and Bailey Act was passed in 1999, and this act required financial institutions to disclose their informational sharing practices. In 2002, the E-Commerce Act, in part, required government agencies to disclose use of personal information. In 2020, California became the first state to pass a Consumer Privacy Act that required businesses to notify consumers in writing about personal information that was released. Let's cover some current threats that you may face and you should certainly be aware of. A list of current threats includes, but is not limited to, social engineering, which is often considered the number one threat to privacy. In essence, social engineering is when somebody convinces you, generally manually, not digitally or via the internet, to do something that works against your own rights or your own privacy. Webcam hacking is another big one. Zoom was victimized last year. Make sure you cover your webcam when it's not in use. Unpassed software, of course, leaves security holes. We talked about that in class as well. Browser extensions and add-ons are another threat. Try to avoid installing them. Social media and ad tracking. Facebook is particularly guilty of this, but Google is too. Both companies' CEOs testified before Congress last month about privacy issues. Advanced and persistent threats. These are ongoing unless and until found and removed. Malware we covered before. Ransomware, of course, is a big one at the moment and seems to happen almost weekly. Governments, foreign and domestic, are a threat. The four biggest foreign offenders are generally China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Some were found to be hacking pharmaceutical companies in 2020 to get secrets about the COVID-19 vaccines. Some hackers, individual, are even state-sponsored. Finally, some of the newest threats include 5G, artificial intelligence, smart homes, drones, the Internet of Things. All of these exist or are in process. Now, having said all this, there are measures you can take to protect yourself or a business if applicable. Be careful about sharing information. I'm no hacker, and look what I found about each of you. I found phone numbers and addresses too. Imagine what somebody who has bad intentions might do. Standardize your software and applications. Update and patch your operating system and security software. Use network and desktop or laptop protection. Be aware that multiple anti-malware packages can conflict and are not helpful. Use a firewall, and of course, again, as we discussed in class, IDS and IPS for your security. Clear your browser cookies and history. Use HTTPS, not HTTP, for secure browsing. Implement complex passwords. And finally, educate yourself on threats and risks, and educate your friends, family, coworkers, and the company you work for. These are my last couple slides, I promise. EPIC, or the Electronic Privacy Information Center, lists some general goals for privacy. The first is to create a list of problem sources, whether they're foreign or domestic, whether they're technical or manual, as in social engineering. Number 2, have a clear plan for privacy protection. Number 3, EPIC would like to put the onus on government agencies to oversee users and maintain individual constitutional rights. And finally, EPIC wants to ensure that users can create and control their own content. In addition to EPIC, some major tech companies like Apple, Facebook, and Google have joined the FIDO Alliance. FIDO stands for Fast Identity Online. This group has listed several future steps they're either taking or plan to take. As we can see on the slide, they would like to reduce password reliance, instead use things like security keys, biometrics. They would like to verify whenever a camera or a microphone is in use. These companies would like to limit photo and location access services. They would like to limit Wi-Fi tracking and device tracking along with it. And they would also like to limit application tracking. It's a trade-off between business and consumers, but nevertheless, it's all helpful to privacy, and it's all something we should embrace. Thank you very much for your time and attention to my presentation, and have a wonderful summer.